All right, so today I wanted to talk about this story, and it's rather alarming to say the least. And it was a study done by the UBC, I believe, titled "1 in 10 Canadians Say They've Contemplated Suicide Since the Pandemic Began." Um, and it says 1 out of 10 Canadians reported experiencing suicidal thoughts in September at the onset of the pandemic's second wave, a staggering, unprecedented figure that experts say shows the extent of the prolonged mental health toll of you know what has on the population. The figure reported the latest survey conducted by the Canadian Mental Health Association, which asked around 3,000 Canadians questions about their mental health between September 14th and 21st. Early on in the pandemic, there was a sense that many of these mental health consequences were going to be quite transient, that they would resolve quickly alongside the pandemic, said Dr. Emily Jenkins, a lead researcher and associate professor at the University of UBC School of Nursing. So, um, this is very alarming to say the least, like very alarming. And the reason I wanted to, I mean, I think there's a few reasons I wanted to talk about it. The first one being like, how bad do these numbers have to get before the lockdown zealots start questioning the lockdowns? Like seriously, like how bad do they have to get? We are, you know, we're going to be a year into this in March, and like again, like how like this is the fundamental question that I think this whole situation comes down to, and this is the fundamental reason why I hold the beliefs that I hold in that um, for the lockdown zealots, you need to ask these people, and unless they can give you an honest and objective answer to this question, I'm never going to take them seriously until they can do this. And you need to ask them, okay, well, what scenario would need to unfold, or what scenario would have unfolded for you to be wrong? Like, what scenario would need to unfold? And considering I've never gotten a straight answer out of, I've asked this question hundreds of times, or into the hundreds of times probably, and I've never gotten a straight answer. The best answer you get is the, we just got to play it safe kind of, that BS. So again, until you get an honest and objective answer with hard numbers, hard facts, saying, okay, this is what would need to happen with the numbers. This is what would need to happen here. This is what would need to happen here. Until I get an honest answer for that, I'm not going to change my mind on this kind of stuff. Because again, I've been very clear on that. I've been very clear for months now, very clear. And that what it would take for me to be wrong is a very clear correlation between lockdowns, mask mandates, and a reduction in cases. And this is the thing that people bring up too, is they'll point out, literally like one or two areas, and they'll use that as an excuse. Again, they don't allow you to use South Dakota, Florida, and Sweden, even though they're all examples of lockdowns not working. But then they think that, oh, Australia and New Zealand's enough evidence to support lockdowns, right? Again, it's the insanity of these people is, it really knows no bounds. It really knows no bounds. But again, the problem is that the onus is on these people. The onus is on these people. Unless there is a near perfect correlation, preferably a perfect correlation between lockdowns and a reduction in cases and deaths, then there's no reason to lock down. The hospitals have never been overwhelmed. Again, that's one of the biggest lies coming out of this whole situation. The hospitals have not been overwhelmed. Maybe a literal, 1/10 of 1% of hospitals, maybe. But as a whole, the hospitals have not been overwhelmed. You look at, all-cause mortality is not even up this year. Not even in Sweden, the area that the doomsday crowd think is, going to be doomsday. Um, not in the States, right? Not in Canada. Again, so I'm trying to go down the range of possibilities, trying to justify these people's worldview, and you can't do it. You can't do it. And the reality of this whole situation is the politicians and the medical health professionals as a whole, because there's some exceptions to the rule, but as a whole, they're people who are power hungry, they're narcissistic people, right? They want power. They love having that power over people. They love subjugating the population while still not following any of the rules themselves. They just love that stuff. They eat it up. And here's the thing too, like I don't care if people say, oh, this guy's a good person. I mean, because there is some. But the reality is that any politician who's supporting lockdowns at this point, they're not a good person. They're not a good person. Either they are sacrificing their actual beliefs just to please a political party, because I know a lot of these political parties force you to vote, to tout the party line. Either they're going completely against their, and basically they're admitting they have no spine, like they're admitting they have no spine, in which case I don't like them, even if they agree with me. Um, they are a power hungry, narcissistic, loves to subjugate the people kind of person. They're in one of those two groups. I mean, you have the Randy Hilliers and then the Christy Gnomes of the world that are good, but the vast majority of them aren't good. There's some doctors that are speaking up, but again, a lot of these doctors, from what I've heard, they're afraid to speak up because they're afraid the government will go after their medical license, right? So again, like, people need to start speaking up. I mean, I think that's the most important thing, but I think the next most important thing too is that you need to realize that the people that are, at least on average, the people that are deciding policy, they're not good people. Again, I don't care what side of the political aisle they're on. Like I just said, either they're people that straight up are power hungry, narcissistic a-holes, or they're people that maybe they're not in that group, but they're willing to sacrifice, any moral and ethical spine they have just to please their whatever their political party is. Like I say, either way, I don't really care. Like, the person that doesn't believe in this garbage that goes along with it anyway is just as bad as the people who do believe in the garbage, right? They're just as bad. Um, so again, now that I have that out of the way, like, getting to the main point here, um, if someone would have told you, like, this is another way of looking at it too. Like, this is another way of looking at the lockdowns now too. Like, if someone would have told you back in March, and they said, okay, we're contemplating whether or not we should lock down, but I have a crystal ball, I have a time machine, and I can guarantee you that the hospitals will not be overwhelmed. I can guarantee you that the only people that really need to be worried are people in nursing homes and people who have multiple serious health conditions. Do you think it's a good idea to lock down everybody or to have massive restrictions on everybody? I don't see how anybody could argue with a straight face that that's a good idea. I really don't. Like, how could you? How could you? Because the justification at the time was we gotta have these lockdowns so the hospitals won't be overwhelmed. The hospitals have never been overwhelmed. And this is the other absolute insane thing that we have to go over again, like we have to keep going over again, is that people there's people that genuinely believe that we're saving lives by doing this. We're not. We suicide is through the roof. Drug overdoses are through the roof. You may be saving a handful of lives by having lockdowns, but when you look at the big picture, you're not saving lives, because to think that we're saving lives would have to be like saying, you know, we have a policy position. We can do nothing, and the amount of people dying will end up being zero. Or we can have a policy position to where we're going to put this policy in place. It'll save 10 people's lives who otherwise would have died, but it'll kill an extra 20 who otherwise would have lived. Like, who in the right mind would support that policy? But this is the same thing that these people are doing that support the lockdowns. They think that because, you know, they're saving literally a handful of lives because of the lockdowns, but more people are dying because of other causes. They're actually saving lives. It's like the insanity of these people. It really knows no bounds. Like, it really knows no bounds. Now, there is a lot of stuff that goes into this stuff, but again, the reality has been all along the hospitals have never been overwhelmed. It's highly unlikely they will be at this point, considering most hospitals are no higher capacity than they are on a normal year. Um, and again, the amount of damage that's been done by other causes far exceeds the amount of damage this virus could ever do. Far exceeds it. And one of the main reasons why the average person is ignorant enough to go along with it is because the negative ramifications of this kind of stuff, the negative ramifications that come with mass unemployment, with insane amounts of businesses going out of business, the effects of that are not going to be felt for upwards of like a decade or two, like upwards of a decade or two, which means the politicians that are in power are they're all out of office. The people that supported the lockdowns are too stupid to recognize that the growing problem down the road, they're too dumb to put two and two together, right? Like this is the thing too, that the people who support lockdowns, they're people, at least as a whole, because there'll be some exceptions, but as a whole, they're people that have no ability whatsoever to do basic cost benefit analysis. They have no critical thinking skills whatsoever, because if they did, they would be skeptical of the lockdowns. Like anybody who's not skeptical of lockdowns at this point, they have no ability to think critically, like by definition, because there's no correlation between them and a reduction in cases. There's no correlation whatsoever. And again, I've said this a million times, Australia and New Zealand isn't anywhere close to enough examples to justify lockdowns. You would literally, when you look at the states, the provinces, all these countries, you would literally need hundreds of examples. Until you can have like a 90-95% correlation between lockdowns and a reduction in cases, and again, that's impossible. And if they could do that, they would, because again, you look at basically all of Canada as an example of lockdowns not working. You look at the states, you got New York, California, both have pretty hard lockdowns. Their numbers are, there's no discernible difference between them and Texas or Florida, both places that have much less stringent lockdowns with comparable populations, right? And again, one of the arguments that they use to defend California and New York is, oh, the population density. Okay, well, why don't you bring that up when it comes to New Zealand and Australia then? Both of those countries are very rural areas. They don't have big, massive cities like New York and Los Angeles. And it's very funny, again, the mental gymnastics that these people play. Again, like I say, it's absolutely astounding, the mental gymnastics that these people play. Like, on one hand, population density can explain away everything, but on the other hand, population density doesn't matter. Like, again, it's just absolute and utter insanity, right? It's absolute and utter insanity. And here's the thing, too, like, you know, Manitoba has less population density, than Alberta would when you take into account Edmonton and Calgary, but their numbers are worse than ours. Quebec isn't doesn't have as much population density as Ontario does, but their numbers are worse than Ontario. Right? Again, there's no, maybe there's a little bit of correlation there, but I don't think there's a clear correlation. And even if there is, that's an argument against their Australia, New Zealand reasoning, right? Even if that is an argument. So anyway, I've kind of jumped around a bit here, but again, the main point here being is that how bad do these kind of things have to get? Like, how many of these kind of stories do we need before we start questioning the narrative more? Now, again, there's a lot of people doing that, and good on you. Like, this is another thing too. Like, for the people that are questioning this stuff, like, thank you so much. But again, for the people that aren't, like, what's it gonna take? Like, seriously, what is it gonna take? And again, these people, they won't give you a straight answer. They won't give you a straight answer because they're more worried about, being right and satisfying their ego than they are about actually doing the right thing. So that's what I wanted to bring up today. If you liked the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you check out those links below. Follow me on those other platforms. If you want to donate, you can do that as well. Again, I appreciate whatever support I can get. And like I say, check out those links below. Hit that like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more.